Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I got to tell you guys, I'm kind of excited about today's topic. So I got a pastor, I got a professor, I got a guy who's just a smart dude, right? And we're going to be talking a little bit about the concept of compassion today, and I think it's a really important case, right? Compassion is something that the left twists. And why does this matter? Well, look at what we've got going on. We got the Supreme Court case going on right now where they're arguing that kindergartners should be exposed to LGBTQIA whatever nonsense without parental consent, with nothing. They just want to shove this down babies' throats because they're perverts, and that's what they do is they try and twist and dement our children, but they try and do it under compassion, right? Everything is always about. So why is it that we need to do? Well, we want these kids to understand compassion. They should appreciate people for whoever they are, and they should appreciate this, and they should have. And the idea of compassion has been twisted on such a profound level that we don't even recognize what true compassion is at this point. Now, I'm going to be very interested to talk to Joe. This is Professor Joe Rigney, by the way. I'm going to be very interested to talk to Joe about this. But the thing about it is at the end of the day, true compassion doesn't come from giving someone a high five for being a demented loser or from doing things that are completely improper, immoral, wrong, whatever. True compassion is taking someone like that and helping them to be better. At least that's my perspective. So we'll figure out, we're going to talk about the biblical and the perspective and all this, but it's really an important thing because, George Floyd riots, right? Going back then, you got Black Lives Matter, that sort of stuff. What were we doing? Well, it's compassion. We're standing up for the persecuted. No, we weren't. We're burning down buildings. That's nonsense. But over and over again, well, you got to accept the trans movement. I don't have to accept the trans movement. These people have mental illness. I want to help them. I don't want to say, hey, you want to pretend to be a girl, high fives to you? No, you can do it. You have every right to do it. But it's a mental illness. We want to help these people, especially if they want to start having surgeries and medical interventions that create lifelong health issues. Compassion is having the courage to say to them, I'm sorry. You can pretend to be a girl if you're a boy, but you're still a girl. And if you take these medicines and do these things, you're going to have lifelong health issues. Compassion means standing for what's right, not what's easy. And this is foundational, and it happens across the board. The He Gets Us slogan, the thing that they tried to push in the Super Bowl, I think is the year before last, where they tried to twist Jesus's words. They say, that he accepts every behavior. Compassion isn't about accepting bad behavior. Compassion is recognizing that everybody's a sinner, everybody makes mistakes, everybody does it, and then trying to help them to be better, in my opinion. So I said this permeates our society, and we have to understand it's one of the most brilliant tricks that the left plays. They can constantly try and convince us that they're doing what they're doing out of compassion. So anyways, very eager to talk about it. I'm kind of wound up about the topic in case y'all can't tell. But it's just because it's just such a fraudulent tactic. It's such a nonsensical. It's just awful what they do. So anyways, we got all that going on. And we got some news. There's all sorts of big things. Trump's apparently going to back off of some of the China tariffs. That'll be interesting. We'll see what happens on that. There's just a lot happening, folks. A lot. But anyways, before we get into the show, please continue to support us. Please join us. Go to givesendgo.com/Renslaw. Givesendgo.com/Renslaw. Become a monthly supporter. $20 a month makes a world of difference to us. And if you can give us $20 a month, it really helps. So please, for the cost of a Starbucks a week, you can really make a big difference here. So please do that. Givesendgo.com/Renslaw. And then, as always, go to TomRenz.com, www.tomrenz.com. Again, as you all know, you can't find Tom Renz if you Google it. All you'll get is hit pieces on me. You have to go to TomRenz.com and type it in fully. But if you go there, go to shop up here and then check out our partners and affiliates. Scroll down. We got Kirk Elliott. We got Sapphone, Dulce. We got Sherry Tenpenny's courses. And, of course, we love Sherry. Sherry actually introduced me to Touchstone Essentials, and we got the gut and body detox. But if you use our link, you can get into renz.thegoodinside.com. Get in there and check out their Parashield product. The Parashield product is a great product to help get rid of parasites. So really, it's a neat thing. And parasites are really becoming a hot topic as people are realizing how bad and how severe the parasite stuff is. A lot of us have been exposed and have that, don't even know it. So it's a big deal. Make sure you're checking out Touchstone Essentials. So, all right. Without further ado, I want to bring on our guest, and that is pastor, professor, just all sorts of things, Joe Rigney. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I'm honored to meet you, and really excited about the topic. Right, so you put together a book on that's really going into and discussing the kind of the concept of compassion. And by the way, where can they find the book? Where's a good spot to find it?
Yeah, the best place to find it is if you don't want Amazon to get their cut, which is fine if you do, is centofempathy.com.
Centofempathy.com. And also make sure you're checking Joe out on Twitter. You can find him right here, Joe_Rigney, at Joe_Rigney. Make sure you're checking him out. So Joe, let's talk about the book. Let's talk about what you got going on here. What's your position on this? To me, and I talked about in the intro a little bit, the idea of compassion is constantly being conflated with accepting bad behavior. This is what I'm seeing. What do you think?
Yeah. So the basic argument of the book's called The Sin of Empathy, Compassion and Its Counterfeits, with the idea being that while compassion is a great virtue, it's one that the Bible commends. Jesus modeled it for us, commands us to be compassionate to others, is subject to certain kinds of distortion and corruption. They can be perverted and twisted, like all good things. In fact, one of the main arguments of the book is that the better something is, the more deadly it is when it goes bad. So if you think about, I quote C.S. Lewis. This is something I learned from C.S. Lewis, who regularly talked about, say, something like mother love, like a maternal love, which of course is a good and glorious thing. It's a great thing. It's something that God designed for our good. But when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong.
Yeah.
And it can become, Lewis described it as a maternal vampire, possessive, hectoring, chasing people around, trying to, being bossy, sucking the life out of them. That's a real thing. And it's all the more deadly because it is so, it bears a resemblance to the good thing. Yeah. And so in a similar way, all of our natural loves are like this. Familial love can go wrong in this way. Love of your friends could go wrong in this way. Love of romantic love, of course, can be corrupted and perverted and set itself up as a god and therefore become demonic. And the argument in my book is that love for the weak, the hurting, the broken is subject to that same corruption. It's possible for even something as good as that, and it is really good, to become twisted and distorted. And my argument is basically that's this is an old problem. It's as old as dirt. But in the modern world, it's been highly weaponized and institutionalized such that, as you were saying in the introduction, basically compassion has become untethered from what is true and what is good. It's become untethered from reality. And when it does, it becomes very, very destructive.
Well, let's dig into that for just a second. So this is super interesting to me. So let's talk about, the concept of this, love, right? So, I mean, love in the broken and the hurt could raise them up.
Right.
It can elevate, or it can injure. And the key comes down to, I would argue, and I would ask your opinion, because I mean, you're the expert here, but I would argue that the key is really the intent of it, right? What's behind it? Is the intent to elevate? Is the intent to lift up, or is the intent to tear down or to break down? And that seems to be kind of foundational, right? Because otherwise, I mean, the intent behind the love is really the foundation, right?
Yeah, right. And there's basically, I kind of described 3 different postures that we could have towards hurting people. And I use the illustration of like someone who's drowning in quicksand. Say.
Is this with the intent? So just because you have to forgive my lawyer in me, but the hurt would indicate someone with intent to use love in a weaponized or negative way.
Well, it would be like anybody who's hurting. So you got somebody who's suffering. Okay.
Right.
They're saying they're in pain, they're hurting, they're a victim. And so someone's drowning in quicksand. Well, one response to them would be what we would call apathy. You don't care. There's callous, you're indifferent, and you just walk away. You think about Jesus's parable of the Good Samaritan and the two guys who walk by on the other side of the road. They're not going to get their hands dirty. I don't want anything to do. And everybody recognizes, well, that's bad. That's not what you want to do. And then but there's two, actually, that would be a failure to have compassion, lack of compassion. But there's another danger, which would be to jump in with them and be swept away or drown alongside them, which I think in the modern world, what would that danger be called? Like what that impulse to, they're drowning. I'm going to just jump in there and drown with them. I think the word empathy is frequently used in precisely that way.
I would agree with you.
It's the demand is you have to jump in all the way. Whereas compassion, true compassion, or sympathy would be the older word. Sympathy says, I want to help this person. Well, that means I need to grab onto a big branch on the side, and then I need to reach in there. And so I need to be connected to the side, and I need to be connected to them in order to help pull them out. But jumping in is not going to help them.
No.
Indulging, and so when you start to then widen out and apply that, so those are the three options. Apathy on the one hand would be too little. Empathy would be jumping in, losing touch with the shore, becoming untethered and unanchored from reality, and drowning alongside them. And then true compassion or sympathy would be the proper response to people in pain. But the key thing, and this is the modern error, is that we must be anchored to what is true, to what is good. We can't lie. We shouldn't affirm folly. We shouldn't affirm derangement. We shouldn't indulge in all kinds of validation of evil things. Instead, our compassion needs to have a governor. It needs to have God's hand needs to be on the reins.
So if the intent then, by that reasoning, and I like the reasoning, is to assist and pull them out of the situation and to help elevate someone, then we have a good love, we have a good sympathy, a good thing. It's when you can't go down with the ship, you can't go down with them, and you also can't ignore it. So I agree. I love that perspective, and I think it's a very, very well reasoned perspective. And I agree with you also. I mean, that was the teaching of Christ, right? I mean, that was without any doubt in my mind. He didn't. It's an interesting thing because I saw. Do you remember the commercials? They started pushing the Super Bowl year before last. One of us, or he's like us.
He gets us.
Yeah, he gets us.
Yeah.
I mean, that was appalling to me. And, because they twisted Christ. That was like when I saw what you were talking about, that was the first thing that came to my head, because they twist it, right? Christ was never in any way, shape, or form okay with people doing terrible things. He didn't say, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
I mean, he died so that we can be forgiven when we do it. But I mean, he wasn't okay with us doing it. I mean, but every sin. I mean, he paid for every sin that we've made with another ounce of flesh before he died. I mean, it's a horrible thing. So, I mean, he never said that the actions were okay. In fact, I believe as he healed a number of them, he said, "Sin no more."
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, in fact, a year ago when that ad debuted, I wrote an article at World Magazine called "A Tale of Two Ads." So my name, A Tale of Two Ads. You can go find this one. And basically, it was contrasting that He Gets Us ad, which had a lot of different images to kind of communicate like Jesus cares for the hurting, which is fine. It's just true. He does. But there was somebody made a riff on it called He Saves Us. Uh-huh. And in the He Saves Us ad, the entire message was, this is what Christ delivers you from. He delivers you from your racial hatred and your drag queen and your porn addiction and all sorts of and so it was a series of images, but it was two images of people who God had saved, who He had fundamentally transformed by the gospel. And it was a very stark difference in the kind of message that Christians were trying to put out. In one case, it was very much an empathetic message of validation.
Yeah.
You're okay just like you are. Yeah. In the other, it was, you have problems, you have sin, you're in the pit. God can deliver you. He can save you, transform you, change your life, and make you new again. But that requires something like repentance. It requires a change of heart. It requires you to trust in Him and to no longer justify and rationalize your evil. So those are I do think that's a good example of the kind of message and the subtle twisting of this really good virtue. I want to underscore that. I'm not opposed to compassion. I'm actually in favor of compassion, but it needs to be anchored to what's true.
Well, it's got to be real compassion, right? So one of the big ones that I talk about is, the trans issue, which is, we got that in the Supreme Court. We got that over. And, what I've said and what I've talked about in the past is, listen, if I go to a surgeon and have him sew a prosthetic tail on my butt, that doesn't make me a dinosaur. It makes me an idiot with a tail on my butt. And if I tell you, you've got to now accept that I'm a dinosaur, and I run around and I bite people and pretend I'm a dinosaur, that would be absurd. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous, and it's meant to be. My example is meant to be ridiculous, right? It's meant to be because I would end up in jail for biting people. I would look like an idiot. I would never have a job. I would have probably health issues from a prosthetic tail being sewn on my butt, and there's all these things. Well, but according to the kind of the logic of the pro-trans world, if I did that, you should also accept me. You should accept you should accept my truth. And my truth is not truth, first of all. So there's no obligation for anyone to accept it. And second of all, my truth is unhealthy. It's unsafe. It's not good. So, I mean, to me, there's a lot of issues with that whole approach concept. Everything about that's negative, and it's a problem. So am I off on the parallels here?
No, I think that there's a whole host of issues like that in which essentially people's feelings are placed in the driver's seat. They're elevated to the highest. Feelings become God rather than God being God. And all feelings need to be affirmed, indulged, validated, and you allow others to steer your emotional vehicle. And one of the ways in the trans issue in particular that this happens is a kind of emotional blackmail. I think one of the dangers when untethered empathy is turned loose is that we become subject to emotional blackmail, which is if you don't, and then fill in the blank, affirm me, validate me, use my pronouns, whatever it is. If you don't, then you don't love me. And in the trans issue in particular, it was weaponized by doctors and by school counselors and others in the establishment who basically told parents of kids who were confused and were being catechized and discipled into this insane ideology. They were said, would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? And so they're holding the suicide of their child over their head as a tool of emotional manipulation. And this is a very evil thing. And part of what Christians and conservatives have to learn to do is to see through that manipulative compassion, that emotional blackmail, and instead say, no, I'm actually going to love this person by reasserting reality in the face of their delusions. I'm going to love them enough not to lie to them. That's how much I love you. I love you enough not to indulge your fantasies, because your fantasies will destroy you. And quite frankly, when all of society is reorganized around the delusions, it destroys society as well. And you witness the insanity that we're seeing today.
Well, particularly, very, very concrete. I mean, with the trans issue, particularly, you have literally major health. I mean, if you lop off body parts, it's going to have an effect. If you put kids on hormones that totally change, that are not aligned with their genetic build, that's not good. There's a reason that boys were built to handle testosterone and girls weren't. So when we start messing with that, it causes problems from beginning to end. There's a legitimate medical reason not to do this. And then, of course, you throw in the ultimate evil, which is, the doctors who manipulate the data and the studies to try and make it, to falsely claim that there's some sort of a tie between suicide and transgenderism. I mean, there is a tie. If you go trans, it tends to, the risk of suicide goes up. But instead of having the courage to say to the kid or the adult or whoever, listen, if it's a big difference for me between an adult and a kid too, right? So, with a kid, I mean, we don't let kids buy guns. We don't let them drink alcohol. We don't let them vote. But somehow a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old is supposed to be able to decide to take hormone blockers. It'll screw up their health for their whole life. Now contrast that with, a 40-year-old dude who decides he wants to pretend to be a girl. Well, that's within your legal right, right? Like, I'm not going to support it. And if you say, hey, I'm a girl, I'm going to say, no, no. And brother, I pray for you. I hope you get this straightened out. But, and I'm not going to pretend to do that, right? I'm not going to play pretend. I'm not going to do that whatever you got going on. But with a kid, I mean, we're just destroying their future before they have the capacity to make a decision. It's not even rational, right? I mean, it's never rational, but
right. Well, and the issue is you can't be a little bit pregnant, and I think.
no.
And I think a lot of people on these sorts of issues want to be a little bit pregnant. In other words, they want to indulge it a little bit, but then they don't like it when the results come. They want to sow seeds of insanity, sow seeds of delusion and immorality, but they don't like it when the seeds finally blossom and produce fruit. And I think in the trans issue, this is what the opportunity of the moment is, because I agree it's far worse and more evil when it's done to children. But if you've already indulged the adults and said, this is fine, this is good, this is normal and healthy, then it's, of course, they're going to say, well, then we should teach the kids that it's normal and healthy, that they could grow up and be this too. And so it's not enough to simply say, we won't inflict it upon children. Instead, society needs to have a backbone and say, no, we're going to actually be grounded in reality. And the reality is you're a man, not a woman. And therefore, we're not going to pretend that you're a woman instead of a man. And
well, I mean,
go ahead.
100%. I mean, don't get me wrong. No, you're a boy. You don't go to the girls' restroom, period, ever. I will distinguish on the lawyer side between the right to be an idiot and whether societally we would accept that right, right? Which is a big difference because.
But I think this issue would extend all the way to things like, I mean, I think, where did this come from? It came from actually the indulgence of all sorts of other forms of sexual immorality, whether it's sodomy and homosexuality, all of these issues. This is what cancer does when it's left untreated. It grows and it metastasizes and it becomes more and more deranged and demented. And part of what we have to realize is that when, say, something like Obergefell was judicially imposed by like a form of judicial tyranny that says, no, the Constitution requires us to pretend that two men can be married, which it does not require that. That's it's unconstitutional and it's immoral. But what we did is we enshrined a lie into law. Once you've done that in one area, then what's to stop you from doing it in another area? We've already said that men can become women when we sanctioned same-sex marriage. And therefore, people said, well, great, then men can become women. And so part of what we have to do is actually work our way back to more fundamental first principles of who is God, what has he said, how has he made us, what is true, what is good. These are fundamental basic questions that we have to answer in the affirmative. And then all of our compassion, all of our love gets anchored to that. And when it does, it's a beautiful thing. It's a glorious thing, and it does help people. But when it's not, it becomes a man-eating weed that is highly destructive.
Well, it seems to be quite destructive, and it seems to be spreading very rapidly. I mean, and we haven't seemed to figure out the glyphosate for it. We got all the glyphosate stuff. I do a lot of MAHA work, and it's the irony of using a cancer-causing chemical to eliminate a cancer. But when I think about this, I agree with you. It's kind of all over, and the trans issue is one. But I mean, we've used this kind of idea of compassion. I think DEI in general is a great example of it, right? So we have, God created us, right? I don't care what you look like. The color of your skin is irrelevant to me. It's not a thing, but he created us, right? And so we use this DEI thing. We bring in DEI, and what we say is, well, these people are disadvantaged, so we got to give them a leg up, which, first of all, to me is demeaning as hell.
Right.
It's demeaning. It's racist because we base it on the color of their skin. But what they do is they say, well, you got to feel bad for these guys because they didn't have the same fair shot as you, right? So privilege, that's privilege. The concept of privilege is exactly, in my mind, this empathy gone wrong, because I'm going to tell you, I started working for my grandfather in his local bar and grill at 8. I was flipping burgers at 8. I'm pretty sure I didn't have any privilege. I'm pretty sure I earned what I got and I got what I earned. And I don't even have that much. So the idea that because of my skin color, I somehow had some sort of a privilege is absurd. Now, there are people who grow up in bad neighborhoods, but that's not exclusively for people of a certain skin color. I didn't grow up in a bad neighborhood, so I guess if that's a privilege, but I didn't grow up in a neighborhood at all. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. So I mean, was that a privilege or yeah? I mean, but I think that this whole concept of privilege and stuff, I think it's another form of this same sort of empathy, compassion gone wrong.
Yeah. So basically, what we did is we relabeled things that are what we ought to call blessings. When people talk about you have privilege, and what they mean is you had two parents who loved you, or a grandfather who was willing to give you a work ethic. You could say, yeah, okay, that's a privilege. What we mean by that is that's a blessing from God. It's a kindness that you ought to be grateful for. And instead, by recasting blessings as privileges, which you should feel guilty for, and that guilt becomes a tool of manipulation, which then is fixated on particular aggrieved groups, right? Elevated victim classes, and everybody's sorted. This is what the critical theory and DEI stuff did, is everybody gets sorted into a demographic box. And your box is either you're in the oppressor category or the oppressed category. And if you're in the oppressed category, we're going to reorganize society around your felt needs. And anything you say goes. And if you're in the oppressed category, everything you do is wrong. Everything you're the one thing you can be sure of is you're wrong. And actually, there's actually an interesting connection between the trans issue and this whole DEI regime, because what happened, part of the reason that so many young girls in particular have been afflicted with this social contagion of the trans movement is you have a bunch of white girls who were taught you are the bad people. You are the oppressors because of the color of your skin, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've had all the privilege and the other people have been disadvantaged, and now you should feel bad about that. But if all of a sudden you discover that you are a sexual minority, that you in fact are in the wrong body, and that you are a boy born in a girl's body, and that you're trans, you just moved from being in the oppressor category to being the height of the oppressed category. You are the greatest victim. And over the last 15 years, basically, we witnessed what I like to call the victimhood Olympics.
Yeah, we did.
In which the greatest victim was invulnerable to any kind of pushback or challenge or questioning. And everybody else was required to reorient all of their language, all of their moral framework around the greatest victim. The greatest victim wins. And that's a sign of a highly dysfunctional society, which basically allows the most immature, reactive, and quite frankly, insane members to set the agenda and dictate terms, rather than having the mature, the wise, the leaders to have a backbone and be willing to resist the manipulations of the various aggrieved groups.
Well, I mean, this goes to, essentially, it goes to what Trump is talking about and what Elon Musk has talked about regarding the, you earn it, performance based. Let's see how you do. I mean, are you doing well or are you not doing well? If you earn your position, you get it, right? This is something that they're pushing. It's something we've got to get back to. And it's an unfortunate thing for people because it's not easy to embrace because it requires the one thing nobody wants: work. Right? If I want to earn my position, I have to earn it. Right? Everything that's worth having to me is worth earning. But I think part of this ties into that concept, right? People don't want to earn. They don't want to work. They don't want to put themselves out. They just want it. Everybody wants the world handed to them. They want things to be given to them. They want the easy ride, the free ride. But, I've said before, God didn't promise us an easy ride or an easy life. He promised us if we work our tails off and we do what we got to do here, we get a good ride afterwards, right? But here, we got work to do. We had a Garden of Eden, but we blew that, right? So ever since, we got work to do here, and that's kind of I think the kind of foundational difference here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that there is a way in which human beings are going to look for the easy way out unless they're challenged to take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And part of the dysfunction and we live in this age of anxiety and angst and turmoil, precisely because people don't want to take responsibility for themselves, but instead engage in a kind of blame shifting and excuse making that's always passing the buck. And this is as old as dirt. So in a previous book, I have another book called The Leadership and Emotional Sabotage. That's kind of a companion to Sin of Empathy. But in that book, I talk about the way that you mentioned the Garden of Eden, Adam was charged to guard and protect that garden.
Yeah.
That was his task. But then when this serpent approaches his wife and blasphemes his God in order to tempt her to rebel against their creator, what does Adam do? He's passive. He abdicates. He's silent in the midst of this temptation. And then, having abdicated his responsibility, he then commits a great her intent. He commits, and then so you move from abdication to rebellion. And then when God shows up and says, "What happened here?" Here's what Adam says: "The woman that you gave me, she did it." And this is remarkable because
So it's the woman's fault.
Because, well, what's amazing about it is that there are literally 3 people in existence at this point. And Adam says, all I know is it wasn't my fault. It was your fault, God. It was her fault. It was your fault. It was their fault. I was just standing here minding my own business. But he actually wasn't minding his own business. His business was to guard the garden, which he failed to do. And so that progression right there, abdication, rebellion, and blame shifting. That is a fundamental failure of leadership that we see over and over again in the scriptures, and that we see over and over again in our lives. People who fail to take responsibility for what God has entrusted to them.
Well, that's absolutely correct in my opinion. And I think that there's, and it's just a foundational thing. No one wants to take responsibility for their actions. My life is messed up. Well, what'd you do? What'd you do to get there? Right. And more importantly, what'd you do to fix it? Right.
Right.
But so I think one of the more interesting examples out there today of this misuse of compassion and empathy is the misuse of compassion and empathy to drive, and of all things, this really is shocking, right? The most uncompassionate, horrible action that humanity can take is war. Yet they are using the concept of compassion to drive war, right? Mm-hmm. So we have, and I'm thinking about Ukraine right now, right? So you've got Ukraine. There's all sorts of push for peace, push for this from Trump and everybody else. And, no one will do anything. But from day one, you have this war that I would argue was a deep state war. It was put together. I mean, I think it was orchestrated 100%. I think Russia just listen. They didn't want NATO at their back door, so they said no. They took steps. But, and I'm not to say that Russia is necessarily the good guys, but neither is Ukraine in this, because they're not doing right either. I saw that they've been putting mentally disabled people in the front lines and women on the front. I mean, that's not okay. They have a battalion that fights with the Azov battalion that is openly, it carries Nazi symbols and things like that. That's not okay. I mean, Ukraine is not necessarily a good guy, but what we have is weaponized compassion, saying, well, you've got to support Ukraine. I mean, how can you not support Ukraine? Look at what those people are going through. We've got to go to war for them. Not we got to fight for peace. We've got to go to war for them. We need to expand the war. Not to stop it. No. We want to expand it. What do you think? What do you with the war? I think it's egregious.
A number of years ago, a gentleman by the name of Paul Bloom wrote a book called Against Empathy, which I appreciated. He wrote about 2016, I think. And one of the quotes I always remember from him was that when most people hear the word empathy, they think of kindness. He said, but I think of war. And the reason is, and this is tie that to another quotation from one of my heroes, C.S. Lewis, who said that pity, so this is like compassion, pity, which is a good emotion, if it's not controlled by charity and justice, if it's not anchored to justice, leads through anger to cruelty. Pity leads through anger to cruelty. Why? Well, because Atrocities on the other side are used to justify atrocities on our side. Pity for the oppressed classes leads us to these, reigns of terror against their so-called oppressors. And so these emotions are good. Pity is a good thing, but it's also a very powerful thing. It's a very potent thing. Like, feelings are very, very powerful, which is why it's so important that they are tethered and governed by what is true and what is good, by your moral duties, by the responsibilities and obligations that you've been given in whatever sphere of influence you have. But when we cast off those moral duties, when we totally remove those responsibilities and that moral framework, all we're left with is the tyranny of feelings.
Yeah.
All we're left. In fact, one of the ways I've described our society is we've become drunk on each other's passions.
Yeah.
Right. So we all know what drunkenness is. It's when you imbibe too much alcohol or you take drugs and then you're morally impaired. You're intellectually impaired. You don't think straight. And we talk this way actually about our emotions. If you think about when people say, I was blinded by anger, or I was overwhelmed by grief, or I was paralyzed by fear. That language, that paralyzing, overwhelmed, blinded, passions are powerful, which is why they need to be governed. And what God designed us, he designed us so that he was at the top, and then he governs our mind, and then our mind governs our passions. God over mind, mind over passions. And what we've done is we've gotten rid of God, and then we put the passions in charge. We've put our emotions in charge, and we've said we're going to follow those wherever they go. And so this becomes relativistic. You mentioned earlier, it's your truth, my truth. It's as though truth is a personal property. And we then say your pronouns are personal pronouns, and you get to decide what they are. And it's everyone does what's right in his own eyes, and everybody else is expected to simply go along with it out of compassion. Yeah. So these are highly destructive dynamics that get into all manner of our social ills. Another one, you mentioned war. The one, as you were talking, the one that I thought about, where I see this immensely about this misguided and misplaced compassion, is in relation to the abortion issue. In which compassion, how is this often justified? Well, here's a woman who's desperate. She's poor. She's unmarried. Maybe in the worst cases, she's been raped. And so she's now the object of compassion. And if she was raped, if she is in those circumstances, she absolutely is the object of compassion. But there's a sleight of hand where all of a sudden our compassion becomes myopic and it shrinks. And the only person that we see is her pain, her suffering, and we'll do anything to relieve it, including commit a great evil against her unborn child. There's no compassion for that child. That child is a non-factor. That's an unplanned pregnancy, and it needs to be terminated. And we use euphemisms to cover over the great evil that we will inflict upon this unborn innocent child in the name of what? In the name of empathy, in the name of compassion. And so it's amazing. It's amazing how cruel you can be in the name of compassion.
Well, I would take that even a step further on the abortion issue, because we are pretty rabidly pro-life here. And I will tell you that with regards to abortion, I would actually pull that even closer to the trans issue. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So, the mother that's going through that tough time, maybe she's poor, God forbid she was raped, whatever her issue is. The problem is that once she has killed that baby, she's then going to live with that. And so you've got the emotional trauma that goes with that. Now, not every time. Some women don't care, apparently, but many do. And many end up having a lot of regret and remorse over that. Further, there's legitimate health issues. There's associations with breast cancer, associations with all sorts of things. There are health complications that appear to be correlated to abortion. Now, of course, nobody will study them because that would be bad for abortion, and we can't do that. But the reality is there appear to be some very legitimate, very deep concerns for someone who does that. If we had the courage to do what was morally proper, instead of saying, oh my gosh, we feel so bad, you should go kill the baby, we would say, listen, you're killing a baby and you're putting yourself at risk. It may be more convenient for you. You may be afraid. You may not be ready to be a parent, whatever. But trust me when I tell you, whatever you're dealing with is going to be better than killing that baby. I think that we really got to take a stand on that one. I mean, that one's not popular at all right now. You're not supposed to talk, even if you're a Republican, you're not supposed to talk about abortion right now. We're supposed to be okay with baby murder.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And that's another example of wanting to be a little bit pregnant, is that we think it's okay that we can dehumanize an entire class of human beings and that not lead to greater and greater folly and evil. But like you, as you just described it, it's the same sort of destructive mentality. The trans issue, where we're going to mutilate children, and the abortion issue, where we're going to murder them and dismember them, are related, and both of them are motivated by this corrupted form of compassion and empathy. And I think that the common denominator in some ways is when compassion is distorted and becomes untethered empathy, we fixate on a person's short-term feelings, their immediate feelings, rather than their long-term good. Yeah. So, and this is one of the things we have to grow in. We had, like, part of my counsel in the book is that we have to develop a higher threshold for other people's pain and discomfort. And we have to be able to distinguish between someone being distressed and someone being harmed. Like, people can be distressed, but they're not harmed. We shouldn't want to harm people.
No.
But we need to be able to put up with their short-term emotional distress when we, like, just like you do. And every parent, every good parent anyway, knows this. They know that there are things that their children want to do that would be harmful to them. And we say, no, you can't put your fingers into that light socket. Yeah. But you're hurting my feelings, Daddy. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to save your life. I'm trying to keep you from harming yourself but so I'm not going to let your feelings dictate reality. And so parents know this. Whenever they're parenting, we don't indulge our children until all of a sudden now you're at the point where an entire political party and half of the other one seem to want to say, no, we should put feelings in charge. We should, whatever the feelings of the most immature children or the most insane trans, whatever they want, that's what we're going to reorganize society around. And 100%. Part of what Christians we need to do is say, you know what, we're not going to do it. And we're not going to allow progressives to redefine compassion into this indulgent, relativistic empathy that destroys people.
Well, I think we got to get a little more ready for it. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because one of the most profound areas where the empathy was used as a weapon, a cudgel, if you will, was COVID, right? I mean, we just went through it, right? So you have to wear a mask to keep someone else safe, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I mean, if it's going to keep you safe, let them wear the mask, right? But you have to wear a mask to keep someone else safe. You don't go visit grandma. Let her die alone by herself because that's what she wants. If you don't get this vaccine, grandma's going to die. Well, of course, the vaccine's not tested. We don't know if it works. It's garbage, and turns out it was garbage. But just you got to do it, or grandma's going to die. Across the board, people were manipulated into doing things because they were told it was the right thing to do to help others. Now, from a moral perspective, that's an interesting thing, right? Because with COVID, it was one of the rare instances where a lot of thinking, smart, good people got pulled into this, and they did it because they did think they were going to potentially save someone's life. They fell for the lies, but at the same time, it's interesting to see because a guy like me, we knew in June of 2020 that this was a lie. We knew, and the day that they were locking down, I was fighting with this, right? So we kind of knew what was coming, but a lot of other people didn't or couldn't hear it, and we did what we could to educate them. But there was a process of kind of going through that. So I do think that COVID is one of the most profound things that have happened in recent times to really kind of take this weaponized empathy thing.
Yeah, well, and what it does is it because we know that we ought to be compassionate. We live in the ruins of a Christian society in which Christian virtues were sort of baked into our cultural makeup. Whether everyone was a Christian or not, that didn't matter. The virtues and the norms of society were defined by Christianity. And so what the left discovered is that can be a very effective steering wheel. If you then are able to connect the dots between whatever your policy that you want to enact and those Christian virtues. But you don't necessarily have to show your work. You just have to make the slogan. So love your neighbor, get the vax. Love your neighbor, get the vax. And then the flip side of it, if you don't get the vax, you don't love your neighbor. And you don't want to, and Jesus said, love your neighbor, didn't he? You don't want to disobey Jesus, do you? You don't want to kill grandma, do you? And all of those were manipulations of emotions. And what it was about for many people was it was about this reputation idea. I want to have a reputation as a compassionate, dutiful citizen who does what I'm told. And they leverage, the state leveraged credibility. That's a very precious commodity for authority figures. Credibility is something that once it's lost, it's really difficult to get it back, right? Yeah. A pastor who commits adultery has a really hard time ever convincing anyone of anything ever again. And rightly so, because he's squandered the credibility that he had. In this case, the government had built up credibility and they decided to spend it on this social experiment. And many people they deferred. They said, okay, we're going to trust the experts. Yeah. And then over time, it became clear that, like, wait a minute, but the BLM rallies, they don't have to they can meet, but churches can't. Yeah. You can go to the porn star and the weed store, but you can't go to church. What?
Walmart was much safer than church.
Yeah. And all of a sudden you're looking at it going, wait, this just seems like an arbitrary exercise of power that's being covered over by this manipulative rhetoric that says, if you love your neighbor, you will do exactly what we say. You'll stand 6 feet apart. You'll wear the mask all the time, et cetera, et cetera.
100%.
And so now this is the real destructive thing, is that when authorities have squandered their credibility in that way, it becomes a free for all, because who do you trust? How do you decide who you trust? Who can you listen to? Can you believe what they're saying, or is this just another part of the shell game? And it takes a long time for alternative authorities to develop the expertise and the characteristics and the maturity in order to be able to be an alternative to that corruption and manipulation.
100%. 100%. What do you see across the board? So, I mean, you're also, along with being a professor and author, you are a pastor. You're an active pastor. What are you seeing in your neck of the woods, kind of some of the up and coming issues that we're kind of facing with this? Where do you see things going? What are people coming? Your congregation. Now, obviously, your congregation is going to be Christian. They're going to church, so they're already. These are some of the they're not going to be as impacted, but even there's impact. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that a big question for us will be whether or not we are willing to not simply resist the obvious excesses that we see that everybody agrees are wild, or at least 80% of the country agrees transing kids is bizarre and weird, and what are we doing? But it's whether or not we can see the internal logic and the connections between the trans issue, Obergefell, even feminism, and these sort of things where where did this lie of interchangeability that men and women are exactly the same and they can just be swapped out, where'd that come from? Well, that's a fundamental part of kind of the feminist lie, is that men and women are just interchangeable human beings and that there aren't fundamental differences between them. Right. Both of them are equal, both of them made by God, created by God with dignity and worth and value. But men are made to be men and women are made to be women, which means, for example, in things like combat, you mentioned this earlier, right? To send your women into combat is an abomination. It's a terrible thing to send the givers of life to be the dealers of death. And it's whether or not enough, and I would say it starts with conservatives and Christians, are willing to go back to the root issue and say, you know what, men are designed for some things and women are designed for others, and both of them are good. Men are great at setting the perimeter, establishing boundaries that God designed us to be that the eyes on the wall and to guard and keep. That's what men are for. And then women are life givers. They're nurturers. They bring life. Men put up walls and women turn it into a home. And this is true. This complementarity, like guys, if you just have guys will put up walls and a cot and call it good. And women are like, I think we can do better. Let's put some warmth in there. Let's put some color, some beauty. Let's glorify this. Women are the Bible says this, the women are the glory of man. They're the glory. And so they bring glory. And so what we've tried to do is say, no, we're going to flatten out the glory and we're going to try to turn women into men. Yeah. And we're going to view your womb as a problem because we want you to be just another cog in our corporate machine. We want you to give up your own household and pursuing a husband and motherhood. And we want to say that's bad, or that's lesser, that's inferior. And instead you should go work for Goldman Sachs. And that's where value is found. That's what's really important. And quite frankly, this is when I think about the what's coming. You asked what's coming. When I look at the gender divide in our political and cultural issues, and see that, on a whole bunch of issues, there's 50-50, 52, 48 kind of issues for a lot of demographics, until you get over to unmarried women. And unmarried women overwhelmingly tilt left. That 60 to 70% of them are
way left.
It's the far fringes of the Democratic Party. And I just think in the long run, that's civilization threatening. Because, and the idea, and what's so tragic about it is that what women need is they need to pursue, they need to seek to be a wife and a mother. Like, that's the vast majority of women should seek to be wives and mothers. And if we go, but she has more potential than that. And I just want to say, when anyone says that,
than a mother or a wife,
exactly, when anyone treats being a wife and a mother, keeping a home, and then being the glue of communities, which is when wives and mothers get together, what do? They're like the glue that holds communities together. When anyone denigrates that and treats it as inferior, I say, you're the real misogynist. That's the real misogyny. You hate women. This one thing, you're saying that this unique thing that only women can do, bear children. They're the sort of people that people come out of. Like, people, every human being lived inside a woman for 9 months.
Yeah.
This is amazing. And then God designed their entire bodies to be everything for that child for those 9 months. And then even after, into infancy, as the mother is the one who comforts and cares, and the child calms down when he's in the mother's arms, all this stuff. You're going to say that this is essential to civilization, and you're going to say it's inferior to working a corporate job? Are
100%.
you insane? And I think it's that. I think Christians especially need to recover a kind of courage and assertiveness on that issue, and not be apologetic, not be, oh, well, women can do things too, and this kind of like apologetic where we treat motherhood as though it's second class. Instead, I want to say, this is one of the greatest things. This is my wife will tell you, the greatest blessing in her life is our 3 sons, right? Yeah. Like, after the Lord Jesus, who saved her, that's what, like, there's people that exist because of our union, and we need to assert and say that's central. And all of our politics needs to, like, at some level, like what should politics be oriented towards? Whatever you can do to have families flourish, mom, dad, kids. All of our politics should be oriented around, let's make that good. And instead, what we're doing is dismantle it, take it apart. And in the name of what? In the name of this distorted compassion.
I love what you said about the women. I mean, at the end of the day, so, I mean, I've got producer Andrea here who helps run the show. I've got, my wife. I've got all sorts of people. I cannot do what they do. I can't. Yeah. I'm not just the physical. Obviously, I ain't making babies, but the way they would just work differently than me. And it's not to say that I can't do their job a little bit, or they can't do my job a little bit. It's just, there is a different approach. And instead of embracing those differences, which is ironic to me because the left loves to tell us about embracing diversity. Well, I embrace it. But when I do, they tell me there's something wrong with that. Just because we're different doesn't make you lesser. Now, I'll grant you. So if you stand next to me, I'm 6'4". And I'm about 235. I work out 6-7 days a week. And when I was a kid, I was a fireman for a period of time. Some buildings coming down, I'm your man. You want me in there. You got someone needs carried out, I'm definitely your man. Producer Andrea is very strong. She works out. But she's tiny. Right. I wouldn't, if there's a 260-pound man in there on the ground, good luck. Right. I mean, it's just, there's just certain realities in this world. My wife works out. She's strong. She ain't carrying me out of a fire. It just ain't going to happen, So, I mean, instead of embracing those differences and saying, there's things I do good, things you do good, and let's explore and expand and appreciate those differences, right? I joke around, because I've been told that I might not be in touch with my feminine side, and that I, so like I can't make things.
I'm in touch with my feminine side. Her name is Jenny, and she's wonderful.
There you go. We talk every day. Yeah.
and it's great. But
Yeah. There you go.
that's my feminine side.
There you go. That's how that works. But it's like there's just things that I can't do, and I marvel, the way that moms are moms. The way like when I interact with because I got 2 boys, you got 3. So when I interact with my boys,
Right,
and versus the way they interact with my boys, it's completely different, and it's kind of an awesome thing. I love it and I appreciate it. And I don't understand that lack of appreciation for that whole thing. But
yeah,
so I got to tell you, Joe, I really have enjoyed the conversation. It's really, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we're seeing this across the board, kind of this weaponization and I'd love to have you come back. I don't know if you've written on any these other things. They weaponize the whole concept across the Bible. I think, one of the things that, we're coming up on the end of the show, but I'd just like to get a real quick reaction on this one. So the idea of Christ as kind of a non-fighter. Now, to me, everybody likes to point to turn another cheek, right? Mm-hmm. Turn another cheek as if you sin against me. Mm-hmm. But if you sin against my neighbor, if you sin against a child particularly, it's better that a millstone be put around your neck, right? We have a duty, and Christ didn't teach pacifism. Right. He taught peace first. He taught forgiveness, but he didn't teach pacifism. Right. He said that there will be a time when you need the sword. And there are things worth fighting for. And one of the things that I'd like to just get your quick reaction on is Christ, I think, yes, he taught forgiveness, but he wanted us to stand on principle. He wanted the opposite side of this empathy talk is the idea that we're also supposed to take a stand for things and sometimes even fight for them because what's right doesn't change because it's inconvenient. Right. And I'd just like to get your comment on that one real quick, because I think that's
it reminds me, I'll end. This is a great place to end with another quote from my hero, C.S. Lewis, who said, "Mercy detached from justice grows unmerciful."
Yeah.
And so Christ is both. He brings both mercy and justice. Yeah. And so mercy, is there forgiveness? Yes. But does he also establish authorities in order to bear the sword, in order to establish justice and pursue what's good and resist the evildoers, punish the evildoers? Did God establish those authorities? The answer is he did. And they should punish the wicked and they should praise and commend the righteous. And oftentimes what we have is a state that punishes the righteous and rewards the wicked. So it's an unfaithful state that needs to know who gave it that sword and seek to obey King Jesus. But these are not opposed to each other because it's possible to, at a personal level, turn the other cheek. Especially, I think that passage is fundamentally about being insulted. I think the slapping on the cheek is an insult more than it is like a. It doesn't mean if someone's trying to kill you that you can't resist them or something like that.
Right.
But you can extend forgiveness, and you cannot take yourself too seriously and worry about your own dignity and honor and in ways that are illegitimate. But if someone is trying to harm someone else, love for neighbor means that you can intervene or the state can intervene in order to prevent evil, to punish what is evil and restrain what is evil. And so, recovering a more fully orbed vision of the way that the family and the church and the state work together, I think is a great need of the hour, all of which should seek to obey the God who made and established them.
Amen. Pastor Joe Rigney, Professor Joe Rigney, Joe Rigney, guys, Joe_Rigney on Twitter. Where's the book again?
Setofempathy.com.
Setofempathy.com. Make sure you're checking it out. Support us at TomRuns.com as well. Thanks a lot, Joe, for being